In this video, we're going to make an animated loop with Batman's cape flapping in the wind using a .png and the puppet pin tool. I've started by bringing in the PNG file with Batman that I want to use. I'll let it define its own composition. Dragging on the icon, I'll drag it to the bottom of the project window over a red, green, blue film strip. The first thing I want to do is in the composition window, I want to drop out the default black background in After Effects. To do that, I would go to the left of where it says Active Camera and click on the checkerboard pattern. The way the puppet pin tool works is we would pin down our picture to stabilize it, but also to add the points we would use to actually animate it. The puppet pin tool looks like a little stick pin at the end of the toolbar. I'm going to click on that and I'll go around the perimeter of my document, and I'm putting frequent pins where I would like to keep the image stabilized. Now, once I've got some points in, if I were to go and click on it now with the cursor, it turns into a white arrow, and if I drag it, it lets me move that point. But if I haven't pinned down the rest of the image where I'd like it to be stabilized, it moves as well. So the first thing I'll do is go around the perimeter, placing these points that will allow me to stabilize as well as animate. And my playback head is at frame 1. This is one of the exceptions in After Effects where the tool automatically puts keyframes in for you. So if I were to go down to my timeline now and move my playback head and open up where it says Mesh and then Deform, you'll see this puppet pin sequence that has been introduced. Now this can be daunting, it can be kind of clumsy to have to animate it, but we won't have to do that. I'm going to collapse it, and then I'm going to put my playback head at second number 1. Now I'll go in and just move the points with my cursor where I'd like the cape to be moving. And because I've put a lot of points around the perimeter, the rest of the image remains stable. So once I've got something that kind of implies it's waving cape, I'll be able to play it in my timeline. So now if I were to drag back and forth, you can see the effect. I'm going to leave my playback head at second number 1. I'm going to edit my file at that point in the timeline, holding down the Option key and hitting the close bracket, or Shift and snapping it to the playback head. With the clip selected, I'll hit Command D to duplicate, and I'll place them one after the other in sequence. If I play through, I have the same cycle, and there's a snap where it goes back to the beginning of how it appears at the beginning of the composition. With the second clip selected, though, I can now right-click in the timeline and choose Time, Reverse Layer. And now if I were to drag through, the first frame and the last frame are exactly the same. And I have a smooth cycle now. Next, I want to export that as a .mov with that alpha channel background. I'll put my playback head at the end of clip number 2, and then I'll get the work area and define the parameters of both those clips. Holding the Shift key, I can snap it to the playback head. I'm going to go to Composition, Add to Render Queue, and I'll go to Output 2 and name my clip, and then I'll click on Lossless. Now this is important because we want the alpha channel. So the first step is to make sure that the default background of After Effects is hidden, and then in the output module settings for composition, everything is left as is with the exception of channels. I'm going to change RGB to RGB plus alpha. To keep the file a little bit smaller, I'll turn the audio track off. Clicking OK, I'll click on Render. If I were to import that .mov now and put it in its own composition, and extending the composition time by going to composition settings, or hitting Command K. I'll add another 10 seconds, and if I zoom back on my timeline, I have this extra time. Now I've only got one loop, but if I select the .mov in the project window and I right click and choose Interpret Footage Main, at the very bottom I can add as many loops as I want. And if I were to extend that now and just play it, you'll see that we've got a fluid cycle that repeats again and again.